Thank you, and thank you all for the opportunity to present. Good morning to you. Wait a second. Good morning. All right. Well, we're meeting each right.
Morning. Well, this ain't the morning when we shook hands.
Yes, your excuse. What I'd like to do is to kind of back into the proposal that you have to give some context for it so that you understand where I'm coming from when I make that. And I hope that's okay. And the way I want to do that is by telling you a little bit about who I am, for those of you who know about me from the Royal Gazette.
Some of them look like you from One West.
One West and two West and three West. Toronto Star. Toronto Sun. All right. I don't know. I know where I grew up. I grew up around the pond. Anybody grew up around the pond? Right. Well, this notion of violence in Bermuda is different, and what's happened to Bermuda was an interesting one for me because it wasn't called Victor F. Scott School when I went there. He was the headmaster, in fact. It was called Central School. And virtually every day after school, there was a fight in what was called the desert or on the school field. And people would say fight, and a whole bunch of people would show up and watch the fight. And this was almost a daily occurrence. The difference between those fights and some of the fights today is that there are guns, and guns are lethal in a way that hands aren't. So I want to just kind of remind people that when they say Bermuda's changing, certainly the use of guns is new. The presence of so many guns is both abhorrent but new. But the fact of violence is not new. The other issue about violence is that Bermuda has an even older tradition of violence. The statue of Miss Bassett is a reminder of that Bermuda is a place that in fact was founded on violence against people by bringing in Africans as slaves, and people who resisted encountered official violence. So I wasn't there then. I'm pretty old, but not that old. I wasn't there then, but that is a part of our history and part of what we have to address. And I want to come back to that when I come to the proposal, but that's a reminder. The other reminder that I want to make that's based on the assumptions behind the proposal is that elimination of violence, or what I prefer to talk about, the creation of community safety, is something that's everybody's business. It's not the jobs of the police, it's not the jobs of anybody other than everybody. And some of you may recall a few weeks ago, I don't live around the pond anymore, I live at Loyal Hill. And a young man was beaten very badly after attempting to break into some houses, and one of the consequences was a big sheet up on the wall on North Shore saying, "Don't steal from Loyal Hill." And what that did for me was to remind me that people in Bermuda, at least when I was growing up, took responsibility for things themselves. They didn't call in the cops, they did things themselves. I certainly remember when if I did something and Miss Bridgewater beat me for it, it was no good my going home and telling my mama that Miss Bridgewater beat me, because my mama wouldn't say, let me go talk to Miss Bridgewater and figure out what's wrong with that woman. My mama would say, "What'd you do?" And she would beat me again to remind me. And it took me a long time. I'm a slow learner. It took me a long time to understand that in Bermuda, where I was growing up, that people took responsibility for everybody. The job of adults was to make sure that children grew up properly, and anybody's child was everybody's child. And that was a reality. So in that sense, community justice, community safety, community was the responsibility of community. Bermudians took care of themselves. And one of the things that I've been struck by is in the time that I've been away, I left in 1964, came back in 2009, although I've been back every year for a period, all of that time. One of the things that I've been struck by has been a shift from everybody responsible for everybody else, everybody's brother. A person thinks that he is my brother. A person thinks that she is my sister and behaves in that way. And it's not that we didn't have problems, but it's that we took care of our own largely. And the shift has been, if it's an educational problem, the education department should do something about it. If it's safety, the cops should do something about it. If it's social services, the government social services should do something about it. And that's a big shift for me, and it's a scary shift. And that leads me almost into the proposal. What I want to do is to read something that you would have heard before. When I was press secretary to the former premier of Bermuda, in a press conference, and I'll get you this, and I'll also provide you with notes about what I said, although I'm assuming that somebody will have a copy of this. I did not make a preparation in advance, a written preparation in advance. Bermuda has experienced a series of violent acts and homicides involving guns like we've never seen before. Bermudians are afraid and wonder what's happening in Bermuda, the Bermuda they once knew. A Bermuda where you could leave your home with the doors unlocked. A Bermuda that we boasted about because we're not like other cities and countries where people were shot on the streets. It went on to say, government can make sure that public schools are funded properly. Governments can make sure that we set standards for teaching and make sure that they're met. Government can develop curriculum that's appropriate for the 21st century, but government cannot feed your child breakfast before she leaves home. Government cannot check to make sure that your child does his homework. Only you can do that. In speaking to young people and families. Government can put more police on the streets. Government cannot teach your child to respect authority that is fair. Only you can do that. Government can make laws that make it illegal to assist your child in unlawful behavior. Government cannot teach your child respect for fair laws passed in the interest of the whole island. Only you can do that. There are a number of things in that speech that I wrote for the premier that essentially said government can do some things and does do some things, but there are things that are your responsibility and only you can do that. The other thing that I had written in that speech that the premier, for reasons of his own, did not say was a proposal for how to address in a concrete way, based on my experience in Toronto, a proposal for how to deal with this issue that's the responsibility that you're now sitting here listening to. And a part of that proposal would have resulted in the one that I sent to you. The other part of the proposal was not necessarily a select committee, but a group of people whose job it was to focus attention of all the ministries and the people of Bermuda on addressing this. And it's not expensive, and in fact, I believe that it could have been done within the budget, drawing in people who already exist. So I want to talk a little bit about that. The other proposal that I made is the one that you have in front of you, which essentially builds on what I said, that people in Bermuda have the interest in, ability to, passion for, and I believe the commitment to address community safety in a way that is sustained, and in a way that makes it everybody's responsibility. In Toronto, I am told that as a result of the work that I did, there are people have pointed to 3 young men who are alive today because of the work that I did. They would have been shot to death. There are people who tell me that because of the work I did in Toronto, there are any number of young people, and the work that we did were mostly with young black men, because the work that I got asked to do was as a result of what was called in Toronto in 2003 and 4, the year of time, where a number of young black men had killed each other in big numbers, and that had not been seen before. And Mayor David Miller came in on a platform of addressing that and created a community safety plan that the City of Toronto, every single member adopted. And I got hired to be a policy development officer for the Community Safety Secretariat. And the work that I did, one of the principal pieces of work was to create a new definition of community safety for the City of Toronto that said that community safety is not just the absence of violence, but it is about community well-being and it's about community well-being. That in order to have safety, every person must know that she or he will be treated with dignity and respect in all our public institutions and in all our public spaces. That every person knows that they can expect decent housing, a quality education, that every person knows that he and she are a part of the decisions that affect their lives, that every person knows that in the case of Toronto, that Toronto is their place, that every person knows that each person is responsible for everybody else, that every person knows that community safety is everybody's business, and it is about the prevention of violence as well as the preservation of well-being. When I received an award about 6 weeks ago from the City of Toronto, which was reported here, the mayor departed from the script, his script, for that event, and commented that, and I was proud to hear this, that he was glad to have worked with me and that I did not get enough credit in Toronto for the work that I'd done about community safety. What he said is that I know something about it, and I've taken a lot of public opprobrium for some of the work that I've done, but not enough credit for the extremely good work that I've done. And I think that's true. I think I know something about this. And so the proposal that I'm making, the first one is not in there, is about a structure that I think that will be focused, that can be focused in, I would say, cabinet, but also led by something like this committee.
You'll send that to.
I'll send that to you. And the other proposal that I made is the one that you have in front of you, which essentially proposes bringing, I'll say 100, but it could be 200, it could be 500 people from across Bermuda who, in a probably 2-day process, but it could be 1 day, doesn't matter, come together with their ideas about what they can do and are willing to do, what they're bringing passion and commitment to create the kind of Bermuda that they want to see. And I have heard enough since I've been back to say that people have all kinds of ideas and don't know how to do it themselves. And I believe that the process that I've described in this proposal, which I've done in several places in Toronto, and once actually here 15 years ago at what was Pier 6, when Nelson Hunt owned that place, to bring people together to work on a common problem. And the key to this kind of process is people know what the vision is, what the dream is, where they'd like to get, but there's no one person who can get there, but collectively people can bring their collective knowledge and work on that to get to the dream. And this is a process that works when you know what the picture looks like that you want to get to, but you're not sure how to get to it. And the process that you're using by inviting some experts or interested people to come and tell you what they think needs to be done, I'm proposing that that be supplemented by a process where people actually do those things together and move out from the 2-day session that I propose that I facilitate. Move out from that session, getting things done at the same time as you're collecting information and figuring out what you do with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manas, for your presentation and for laying out clearly the basis behind the actual proposal that you made to us. Certainly, I think your premise that safety is everyone's business. I think that we all can certainly concur with that, and certainly appreciate your presentation in terms of how we can do towards that and to support that. So I'd like to now open up for. Okay, so I'll go to the right this
It's a good meeting, too. Thank you, Mr. Manas, for your
I think
presentation.
I figured it out.
Well, you said you were still learning. You got quick in your age. Thank you for your presentation. I was interested in some of your perspectives, and the question I had is, you talked about the shift.
Yes.
In your opinion, and I think, I understand and I sense that that at the time that I've lived in Bermuda. But why do you think that shift took place?
I think it's a shift not only in Bermuda, I think it's a shift in Western European and North American economies. That I heard Mr. DeVent ask a question essentially about capitalism. And capitalism as it's practiced, and it's not really capitalism, it's not free market, I don't know what it is, but as it's practiced in Western European, North American, and in Bermuda, absolutely requires two things. One, that there be a small group of people who own most of the wealth, as defined in money, not other kinds of wealth. The other thing that is much more fundamental is that it requires an expanding economy of people buying things. It requires consumerism. And an important way in which consumerism gets fostered is by people believing that they are individuals, and that individuals, if they work hard enough or do the right kinds of things, can be a part of that small group that controls the wealth. It's actually not true that that's how it works, but that's the belief. A belief in me as an individual working individually can do the best that I can is a part of a value that has become increasingly injected into, sustained by television, by the stories that people tell about what makes a success, and so on. And the other side of that is a condemnation of things that would encourage collective action, so that when people talk about, as they did in the United States, about Obama's change in healthcare, the way they scared people off was by calling it socialist medicine. And the underlying premise was that people ought not collectively, through their money, collectively support people through insurance, everybody, so that they condemn, for example, Canada's health insurance because it's socialized medicine. Notwithstanding, the results are much better and much cheaper, and that, as I saw in the paper yesterday, Bermuda's healthcare costs are second only to the United States per capita, and the outcomes in the United States puts the United States, particularly for its poor people, somewhere, I think, about 236 in the world in terms of ranking. So there have been pressures against collective action, against community action, and pressures for individualism that result, I don't know if it's conscious, I don't know if it's deliberate, but it has that effect, and I believe it's necessary to reverse it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a specific question, but I am very interested, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Myers, but I am very interested in seeing the proposal that you used, because I do believe that many people working together can address our problems. So at the moment, government certainly has many agencies, and it's all the problems are being addressed. So I just want to thank you, and I don't have a specific question at this time.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Morris.
Good morning.
In
Mr. Myers is my father.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay.
Plus one.
He's also my father.
In terms of this think tank that you propose, I guess, action tank. Are you suggesting that these people who do come and participate in this bring with them the necessary, I guess, startup funds that it would take to drive this, or are you hoping to do this? Have this funded by, I guess, the government, I guess, is really looking to that kind of stuff. And from your experience, what type of startup funding does it take to get a group like this together to run efficiently and then to begin to develop programs that address some of the concerns that we're looking to alleviate?
I may have a figure in this, and the figure that I included in my proposal is about the time that it takes me to prepare to have this 2-day session. Let's say it's 100 people who come together. The issue is not about funds and who funds it. The issue is these people come together and they say, basically 100 people will say, each individually, here's what I think I would like to do, here's what I think I would like to lead, here's my idea about addressing this. And the process is one in which people look at it, it'll be written up on the wall or on the floor or something. And people look at it and say, hey, I'm interested in that. So once we have these 100 ideas and everybody sign up for things that they're interested in, the process that I'm talking about gets, let's say it's Mr. Horton's idea, and it's about doing something up Somerset to get that neighborhood back together like it used to be. Right? So some people would join him, and he'd say, here's what I think I'd like to do, and the people would say, yeah, I'd like to do that, or they'd say, that's a dumb idea, I want to go somewhere else, work on another thing. And Mr. Horton and that group would spend a little bit of time figuring out what it meant, how it would work, and when they left there, what they would do. Now, it may require afterwards some support from government or from some businesses, or then it may not require any financial support. It may just be some people who meet in the neighborhood and do some things. So,
like the organization in the States that goes and builds homes in areas that, let's say, have been ravaged by a tornado or what have you, they go in of their own accord and go.
that's right. That might be. So I can't predict what the cost will be, or who will pay for them, or if there are any costs. My experience is that most of the things will not require money. Some of them will.
More than anything, a comment. I think I agree with the idea of somehow getting people, the need to get people together in a coordinated fashion, because since this increase in violence has taken place, you've seen lots of groups form, and the excitement of it all, and I observe people say, yeah, we're for this. And shortly thereafter, it fell apart because I think there was no coordinated effort to keep people interested or to keep people involved. And so in that regard, the concept of having somebody or some group to kind to help to keep people involved is a good idea. And I think, as he said, it doesn't really, I mean, somehow we always come up with money, the concept that it requires money. And I think you can argue, you cannot disagree, but I think the concept that you're talking about is that people together don't necessarily require much money to get what's needed done. That's just a comment.
Can I just,
Yeah.
one sentence, just, I believe that sustained action requires passion and commitment, and the process that I'm talking about energizes large numbers of people to move forward.
One other observation. And I think I mentioned this already. It seems to me that generally the people who have gotten together in this effort have not been within the age group of people that were having a problem. And I think some of what you discussed earlier with regards to that mentality, that need, the change, the shift in how people think as opposed to community as to myself. And that's what bothers me, because I see my age group and older involved in trying to actually make this change. But if you go to many of those gatherings, the age group that's involved in the problem aren't there. How do you have some idea of how you might be able to attract people that are in that age group?
Two responses. The first one is, it's everybody's problem. So it is ours, as well as anybody else, including, as you're describing, the young people. And this process that I'm talking about, one of the ways that I did this and was actually going to do a big piece in Toronto was to get young people who are leaders of gangs together in a separate quiet site that wasn't going to be advertised, for them to work on what they wanted to do. This happened with the Crips and the Bloods in LA, and was actually least for a period, quite successful at reducing violence between those two gangs. The process that I'm talking about explicitly addresses inviting young people to be a part of it, and the process, when I've done it, has brought in young people.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Myers, Arnold, I'd like to continue this, what is now developed into a dialogue, as I see that we've got here. And I buried in my comments will be some questions, and they basically build on what Ashfield just had to say. As I sit here listening to you, I was thinking to myself, I agree to a large extent that a lot of our problems today, or some of them, are much attributed to our material success as lack of it. And it's a deeply embedded problem in so many ways and so many levels. And a conference is a good way to begin. But what I wanted to ask you was this, Mr. Chairman, forgive me, I'm thinking out loud and I'm thinking on my own when I say this. This committee has been structured, as you see, it's bipartisan, multi-partisan. And I've always thought it's a good start in tackling this problem. Certainly a beginning, not the end all. And I wondered, first of all, if you've been following along and what your impression is of the input we've been receiving as reported in the news media, because that's the only way you would have heard to this point. And I thought, well, this is going to be a good beginning, because I see us as developing something of a blueprint, national plan, based on what people have come forward with suggestions of many groups, and we're still inviting groups to come forward, people who are at various points on the spectrum of how should I put it, assisting or helping or tackling the problem, whether it be immediate through the police or long-term through social services. And I was wondering if you would agree with my thinking here that if we get our report done, get it out there, get it discussed, that then we need, because our impression too is that we're seeing a lot of different groups tackling the problem in different ways, perhaps in their own silo, that description. And we sense maybe there isn't the coordination of the resources we have already, which will always be limited and limiting in Bermuda, and that they will need to be pulled together in some way if we decide that this is an overriding problem, an issue that needs to be tackled. What's your impression of the services and resources we have in Bermuda? Are they, in your view, sufficient? And it is just a matter of pulling them together in terms of coordination. It's a long spiel, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to get it off my chest, too. Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue.
I think that the resources exist in Bermuda. I think that, in my opinion, in the short time that I've been here, and still limited data, my strong suspicion is that there needs to be not so much additional spending. I suspect less spending might be helpful, but reallocation, focused reallocation. And I've been struck by the presentations that many people have been making, a number of which, as I hear them, can be done within existing resources. And the other thing is, when I talk about focus, I think the notion of coordination is a useful one. I worry a little bit about too much coordination, because the value of a number of people doing different things can produce good results, but when you start getting too much coordination, you lose the creativity that is inherent in messy processes. And
balance coordination.
That's right, balance coordination. That's right. There's a notion in management about managing loose and managing tight, and the trick is to get that balance. Get it tight about the value and loose about the process, that people loose to do it.
Yeah, I think, Smalls, I think you're right. I think that, as Mr. Barrett and Mr. Gunn has mentioned as well, and from what I viewed, and then from all the number of presentations that we've had, there's no question that we have a lot of expertise, in our country. We have a lot of people who are interested in resolving the problem that we have. And I think the point that you make in terms of what we always said, that we do need a coordinated effort, but I think your point about it being not ruining creativity is certainly important, because you have a lot of people who work in these groups some who like to they're doing something on their own, so to speak, but you want to do it on their own in relation to an overall strategic plan. So I think that's a very, very, very valid point that you made, and a great strength for the proposals that you've actually made. This has been very worthwhile, Mr. Myers. You came all the way from Lower Hill. You moved away from your point, don't you? To Lower Hill, so you could see
But Art Nels
North Shore. See the North Shore rather than the pond. You see the big pond. The pond that separates.
And I do want to add that there is the whole issue of duplication of effort.
Yes.
Exactly.
Lot of-
And I think that's what you're really pointing to when you talk about that. And so I think this is something that certainly needs to be addressed.
There's a lot of good people here, a lot of good people, a lot of people with great intent, and I think you're right. And hopefully we can assist and to pull it together and not only move and bring about change that is needed. Thank you, sir.